Hey everyone, welcome to an edition of, I was going to say an edition, the best edition, one of the best ever editions of the Iterate podcast. I'm Aaron Schwartz, one of the founders of Iterate. We build AI segments for hundreds of top Klaviyo brands, which also means top Shopify brands, Caraway, Spanx, AG1, you name it. And I'm here today with Matt Cohn, who is at Shopify, and I've known for dude, I don't even know how long. I was trying to figure out like if it was from Loop or maybe even before from Passport. For many, many years. We met when Matt was a CSM or MSM, sorry, at Shopify, and his career has grown and he's in the office of the president now. Matt, let me stop blabbing. I just want to hear you give a proper intro to yourself and can't wait for this conversation.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm excited to chat today about all things Arita and what we're seeing in retail, but great to be on the show. Matt Cohn. I'm currently, my role is the technical chief of staff. I report to our president, Harley Finkelstein. And prior to that, I've been at Shopify for nearly 8 years now. So it's been an incredible ride. I've seen the tremendous growth and success of Shopify in the commerce space, of course. I've worn many hats at Shopify. So prior to my current role, I've worked at some of our largest brands, and I've obviously spent a lot of time in the customer success space as well. And then prior to that, I was actually on the brand side. So I used to work at Spin Master. For any of those listening who have kids, nieces, and nephews and know Paw Patrols, I used to figure out in my day job how to get Paw Patrols digitally or from a digital footprint to in a kid's hand, which was a tall order to say the least, which I'm sure we'll get into. So I had both sides of the seat, if you will, on the brand side, and then obviously been at Shopify for the tail end of my career so far.
My only goal during this discussion is to have you say Chase is on the case, but have it feel more natural than that. So yeah, we'll dive into some Paw Patrol stuff, maybe in a little bit. My kids have aged out, so not ungrateful, but slightly grateful.
Getting there. I'm in the prime years now with my we're just getting into Paw Patrol, so it's
I love it. Well, let's actually start at Spin Master, right? Because obviously, like you're deep embedded at Shopify at this point, but you came from the brand side. I'm really curious, like, what did you learn from that experience? What was it? What kind of got you hooked on commerce, continuing down this career path? And then maybe we can dovetail into the transition into Shopify.
Sure. It was really interesting. I think it was a combination of the genuine passion I had for the commerce space, but also right place, right time, right industry. What I mean by that is, obviously the toy space being CPG, it's an extremely challenging, and I still have this belief, I maintain this belief to this day, and having worked with, plethora of toy brands on the Shopify side, it's one of the toughest verticals or nuts to crack in digital sales, because the child is the consumer, parent is the purchaser. So the marketing is, discrepancy there. There's obviously, from a legal standpoint, lots of red tape. Price point isn't always the highest. So from a profitability standpoint, harder to get conversion rate. And then you obviously have the retailer dynamics with the Goliaths of the world, big boxes that parents are accustomed to purchasing from. And so it really was a forcing function for me putting the brand hat on to be challenged with this existential question of how do you differentiate yourself from a digital lens and be successful? And how do you carve out a strategy in that sub vertical in the space of digital commerce that is going to provide longevity for the business and also, of course, revenue? And so I think that was a forcing function for me to have merchant empathy. That's something I hold to this day that really paid dividends on the Shopify side, because having been in that seat, having to have had effectively almost run my own business within a business where, demand planning, inventory, supply planning, marketing, accounting, finance. At the end of the day, it's a line of business with a P&L. And so I think the merchant empathy, understanding how a given stakeholder within a merchant has to navigate those relationships to be successful, it's something I still hold very close to my heart, because I had to live and breathe that. So I'd say by far and away, the biggest takeaway for me was that merchant empathy, for sure.
I really appreciate that. I mean, you know this about me, but I ran a brand for about a decade. And I think one of the things that has helped me switching over to the dark side of kind of commerce enablement is actually remembering how much of a pain in the butt it was for me to like let go of $20 or $50 for an app, and then like what my bar was for that app. And it was always unfair, but it was my money, right? And it was my customers who we were serving. So I very much appreciate that empathy side. I do think a lot about the like omni-channel, and maybe I can just dovetail a little bit. A lot of our customers, obviously it's like straight line D2C, and they want to, the objective they have is to go get a purchase, right? Like let's send Matt an email, let's send him a text, let's send him a direct mail, whatever Rita helps with segmentation on to go get him to make that purchase. But we do have some customers, some brands, right? Some retailers who are omni-channel, And a lot of what they're going for is actually touch points and engagement and like education, right? It's not just how do I go get that next purchase, but it's how do I really build a community experience for customers. Is that something that you saw kind of at like Spin Master, where you were trying not just to drive the number, but also like the dollar number, but also just to drive engagement and education on the product side?
It's interesting. Short answer is yes. There's a few different facets to this. So the first piece
Yeah.
is I would say industry specific. Second is timeline. So firstly,
Mm,
industry specific. What I would say is because and again, honing in on the toy space in particular, because consumers were and to some extent still are largely trained to, buy toys in store or to buy from, certain big boxes and the especially when I was at Spin Master, 2016, 2017-ish, 2018, the it was still so early days in commerce, I would argue, in digital e-com that a lot of it was count. And again, in the toy space, owning in there is kind of counterbalancing or supplementing those primary revenue drivers for the business overall with digital, right? And so my perception was, of course, I wanted e-com to be fruitful, but I also had a due diligence to the organization to make sure that we're complementing the overarching strategy in terms of primary and historical revenue drivers and lines of business. And so what that looks like from a tactical lens is oftentimes digital e-com footprints, rather than having a PDP where you can click add to cart and purchase, maybe the CTA is actually store locator and you're driving from e-com to somewhere else for that final point of purchase. And so that kind of shifted the scales in terms of from an omni-channel presence, what does success actually look like? Because in following that example, of course, one of my North Stars was conversion rate. But if I'm going to be leaning into a strategy where I'm actually driving to retail, there still should be due credit for the e-com channel as a pass through. But at the same time, that's a completely separate, a different set of metrics than conversion rates. The other I would say is that, of course, I mean, putting my Shopify hat on, we've seen more and more of an omni-channel presence in terms of being a forcing function from the customer side. The customer showing up in more different areas across their physical and digital journey. And so that has allowed Shopify to, I mean, really, Shopify is meeting customers where they are, right? And that's kind of the ethos of the platform. It's a hub and spoke model. And so what I would say is going back to my Spin Master days, we saw early inklings of that. We had marketplace integrations. We were trying to spread our tentacles into different channels to be more than this central hub of ecom. But it was interesting because now that we're chatting about it, in hindsight, I think that was a telltale of what would eventually become what we all know now as ubiquitous omnichannel presence.
it's interesting. We'll dovetail more into where Shopify is today and everything. I want to linger on your journey for a little bit because candidly, I think it's really fascinating. And the fact that you think about consumer empathy plus brand empathy is actually something that has always really struck me. Like when I talk to you, I know we're not just getting here's this cool new piece of technology, but it's in service of something, right? Serving the brand better or serving the consumer. So let me stay here. What was the move into merchant success? Did you consider like you're amazing at it, but like, how did you know that was a place for you? Or was it like, hey, look, I'm taking a job and maybe this is the right fit and maybe I'll network through somewhere else?
It's a great question. I mean, and not to be cliche, but the honest truth is, I remember I was in the seat at Spin Master, and I love toys, but I just became absolutely enamored by it, just completely rose-colored glasses, fascinated by this world of e-commerce. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Found out about Shopify, of course, through some quick research. I mean, a Shopify office was 200 meters down the street from the Spin Master office, and I felt like I was in Willy Wonka land. I just felt like I was a kid in a candy store, and that really drove me to this world of merchant success. Where when I looked at the opportunity, the way the way I perceived it was, I'm having so much fun doing this thing and honing in on this vertical, within this respective industry of the toy space, which I love to this day still. But the merchant success opportunity, moving to the, you call it dark side, for me it's Willy Wonka land. It was just an opportunity to what I always categorized as informally going to the school of e-commerce. I felt like it was an opportunity to be immersed with every different line of business and to create like this accelerated bang for your buck experience where I'm interfacing with online liquor sales and automotive and of course apparel, beauty, health, wellness, food and beverage. But I got this holistic view of an incredible breadth of different disciplines of commerce. And again, I just had to be very introspective and honest about where my biggest passion lied. And to this day, I'm glad I followed that path because I get to do what I love every single day.
And I'm curious what you think the role of the MSM has become over the years, right? Like even in your current title, right? Your technical advisor. If I think back 7, 8 years ago, right? Or 6 years ago, whatever it was when you actually started like in the merchant success seat, to me, it was, look, there's Shopify is growing. There's a thriving app ecosystem. Everybody's basically staying in their lane. You've got the great returns providers and the great CRM ticket and the yada, yada, right? And now it feels like everybody is empire building and Shopify is like each of the apps is taking out a lot. And Shopify itself is building just an incredible amount of new products. I mean, every 6 months we get to see it. And I know that there's more that we're not seeing yet, right? How do you think the role of a merchant success manager has changed over time?
It's a great question. I think the fundamentals at a philosophical lens, what is the point of a merchant success manager? What's the value? What's the purpose? It's to add value to the business and grow and assist in strategic growth to that client. What does that actually mean in practice? My perception of it has always been, or my perspective here is that it's a matter of understanding intimately what makes that business tick, who the stakeholders are, what the business model is, how they connect with their consumers. It's understanding intimately the I don't want to bucket it as technical because it's bigger than that. I think it's understanding the ethos or I would argue the set of values of a given piece of software. Let's take Shopify Arita, for example. It's understanding why we do what we do. So it's higher than technical, it's higher than product, it's the purpose of what we do. And then it's a matter of reverse engineering and playing Cupid. And so what I mean by that is whether you have something that has enormous breadth like Shopify, because it's the beating heart of an organization where we do fraud, inventory management, product management, except the list goes on, or you're very narrow in scope, it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's always an MSM's job or CSM's job to curate and understand based on what the business opportunities are, what set of products and services is the right match for that business to really thrive and see that success that they're looking for.
I really appreciate the reverse engineer play Cupid perspective. I hadn't actually thought about it that way. And I think that's so spot on. How do you, all right, how do you think the role has changed in terms of being more or less technical? Or is it the type of thing which is like, hey, you rely on your technical team, your product team, you kind of like you're even matchmaking within there, not just like job to be done, here's an app or here's some product, but actually like, look, that's a really good question. Here's a hard problem. I want to get you in front of the right people to discuss the problem.
I have a feeling we're going to say the word AI a lot on this show today. So we'll throw it out there and I'll start with that because I think that like let's just say the thing and get it out in the open, which is a positive thing that I will say, which is AI has lowered the barrier of entry to access to information. It's commoditized, democratized information, which is great. The question becomes, what is your value as an individual, in this case, a CSM, into if no, assuming that some of the information that was exclusive to you is now accessible to a merchant leveraging Sidekick or via the ecosystem as an extension. And the answer to that is really fascinating. And I would argue it actually transcends the role of a CSM. It's
Mm.
that especially in the world of SaaS, I would argue that there was a Venn diagram of all roles in SaaS, and that there was more mutual exclusivity. So what I mean by that is like an A, their primary core skill set was to sell, and an SC, they're very technical by nature, and a CSM was relationship management with a little bit of both. And you had product managers who were like really R&D systems thinking, and you had developers who obviously have their development frameworks that they abide by. And I feel like those Venn diagrams have kind of shrunken and converged just a little bit with the power of AI. And so what I would argue is that the CSM role has evolved. A lot of roles in SaaS have evolved, but especially CSM role where the AEs are more technical, the SCs are more sales oriented, and the CSMs are empowered to leverage both of those skill sets and supercharge what they're doing. And so because access to information is accelerated and because the data can be queried in a much more, again, accelerated timeline, CSMs are much more equipped and much more dangerous and powerful to understand what's making that business tick rather than manually scraping everything. And they can do that reverse engineering process. The turnover of that process is a lot more expedited.
I love it. And at the end of the day, it's still depth of empathy to the brand and understanding what are their objectives, where are they going, what resources do they have, what can they actually get done. All right. So a couple of years ago, you and I were talking and you were at a career transition point, right? And you ended up at this amazing role in Harley's office where, as I saw it, you were working and you tell me where I got this wrong, but able to work with VIP customers and really almost do some level of like merchant success plus concierge plus go bring all the power of Shopify to the biggest brands, right? Or to the most strategic brands or to a subset. First of all, is that like a decent understanding of where the transition was? And then I'm curious, like kind of what that journey was like and what you learned through the process.
Yeah. So I mean, look, what I'll say is this: we have 3 million brands on the platform now. It's
Mhm.
15% of commerce. It's incredible scale. In fact, I think it's one of the stories that we've been starting to speak about more lately that I'm quite proud of on behalf of Shopify, which is the network effect of something like Shop and the scale that we sit on allows us to actually provide benefits to merchants and therefore their customers by extension, right? All of the flywheel effects that we have for the Shop and Shop app and all the different services that we have. And so because of that scale, I have the privilege of being in a role where, as an extension of the office of the president, what my job is to effectively, of course, working with some of the larger marquee brands on the platform. But ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm scanning across our 3 million brands to make sure that I have a pulse on what's happening in the commerce space to make sure that we're continuing to be on the forefront of that journey. And so, what does that look like from a day to day standpoint? It's really, I mean, no day is the same. I know a lot of people will say that, but it's every day is completely different where I'm interfacing with brands that are considering Shopify, working very closely with our sales team. I'm, of course, working with existing customers during executive business reviews and our success team. I'm working a lot internally with product and operations. And so it's really this multifaceted role, but the overarching goal is to make sure that I'm aggregating trends, feedback, insights, and then I'm feeding that again into the internal flywheel to make sure that Shopify is continuing to stay in the forefront of what our merchants need and their customers need.
And at the same time, Shopify is putting out an insane amount, right? I think in the recent editions, was it something like 150 product updates? How do you find the balance and actually see everything that Shopify is producing, plus everything that the ecosystem is producing, plus everything that brands might want that, isn't yet solved yet? How do you find that balance?
It's an incredibly difficult balance, but I do it because I love it. And I always joke it's a full-time job for me to stay abreast of all the updates that are coming down the pipe. But for brands, I think, it kind of coincides with what I mentioned before about the power of a CSM. Like a CSM, they're not going to be
Mhm.
everyone to everything. They're going to intentionally curate, reverse engineer, and make the appropriate pairings. I'd say if that's the push side, the pull side from a brand inversely is they know their business better than anybody else. They know
Mhm.
the areas where there's opportunity to augment the
Mhm.
tech stack that they have, the business model that they have. And so part of it is again them keeping tabs on what's happening and being, having line of sight into those different lanes. But part of it is
Mhm.
just looking at the change log every day. We have a lot of brands that they look at that like it's like brushing their teeth on a daily basis. And so just keeping up to date granularly with what we're shipping out on a frequent basis so that that compounds over time.
Understood. I think I think it was NRF, but it might have been Shop Talk. I bumped into you. I mean, I bump into you at every conference, but this was like a year and a half ago. You kind of just stepped into a new role. You were building your AI guide, right? And you're like, check this out. You sent it to me, and it was incredible, right? I was like, check out all these amazing new technologies. I'm curious if you were to rewrite that guide today, do you think that the problems have changed, or is it more like the tooling has changed, or there's fewer tools needed because there's more embedded in the platform? Like, what do you think has changed even in the last year, kind of looking through this landscape?
I feel like I have to.
Everything has changed. Sorry, that was an unfair question. So everything has changed.
No,
What are
no,
some things that interest you?
I that's it's a fab. What I was going to say is that's a great question, and I realize every question you've asked me so far, I've said that is a great question. So let's just keep it
You're
in
like
third
getting up
because
in an
otherwise
interview, man. You're
I'm
going to
gonna
get the job because you're like, great question. I'm like, I know, I'm interviewing. No,
I just I'm gonna suck up airtime here, but what I would say is I think a couple of things. Firstly, I think the consumers are much more familiar with AI. So anything
mm,
to simplify it, the way that I look at AI is you have the operational side internal and you have the customer side external. So if I
mm,
start with the latter, which is the external side, you have consumers that are like, I mean, exponentially more comfortable to the point where it's expected, right? So that transition from novelty to baseline usage from a consumer lens during the customer funnel, that's table stakes now, right? So in terms of shifting the AI list in terms of like what my must-haves are on a site, what I would argue is again getting tactical for a moment. Listen, this idea of a personalized customer journey is a
mm.
lot more achievable at a cost-effective scale than ever before because of the power of AI. That's what I would argue, right? And so to give you an example, what would have constituted a warranted and an exorbitant amount of resources and manual time and scraping and orchestration would be 5 years ago to re-rank a collections page or a product page based on different signals. And now leveraging the power of AI in real time, even if a customer is not signed in, right, with 3P tooling to really create a one-to-one mapping of what that optimal path is for the consumer, that's a very powerful thing, right? Because it's and I've spoken about this before in other podcasts, but it's this idea that we're departing from this world where you have a universally static site. Like having a website that serves it's kind of what I, again, riding on the coattails of what I said about CSM to merchants and reverse engineering, can't be everything to everyone. You have to pick and choose your battles. And so to be able to automate that and do that at scale with millions of visitors, that's a very powerful thing. So again, more examples, there's customer support, CS, blah, blah, blah. And of course, you have customer segmentation, which is the creme de la creme with Iterate. But on the other side, you have internal. And so what I would argue there is, again, not to take my Shopify hat off in terms of bias, but Sidekick is, again, exponentially getting more powerful and it's expanding its reach. And so the intersection of LLM, commerce data, and agentic nature and execution is, again, that's a complete game changer from an efficiency standpoint for any brand, regardless of size, regardless of workforce shape.
If you think about, let's say on the operations side for a minute and think about Sidekick or any other tooling, is it that the actual like operations, logistics, like P&L side, trying to figure out it, like who are the users who are getting the most value today? And where do you think there's more value that's starting to accrue, right? Is it the CMO or the CO or the CFO, right? Or her direct reports all the way through? Where do you see that biggest value? Is it just the site design?
It's so interesting. Literally everyone can benefit from Sidekick, and we have seen it empirically. I mean, I've seen, I mean, firsthand, or I should say anecdotally, with small brands up to enterprise brands. You have the CEO of a smaller mid-sized company who is personally logged into Shopify, who's using Sidekick to create data queries, right? From scratch. Like, you don't need a SQL developer if you want to go beyond the native analytics. And then, you have site merchandising, you have operations. But to your point, Aaron, even last December with not the editions that just dropped, but the previous edition, when we launched Sidekick in the theme editor, like, again, as a passionate technologist here, this idea that you can shift the scales to not necessarily being a developer by trade, still partnering with the developer to really create the bells and whistles of the experience, the foundation of your design, but be more empowered as a business facing user to just prompt the platform to create the site that you want to create is an incredibly powerful and also very satisfying thing. And so the common denominator between that and the external customer example I provided a few minutes ago is that, again, it's creating more autonomy, but it's also creating a much quicker flywheel in terms of testing, iteration, and experimenting, because you can get to what otherwise would have taken months, weeks, in minutes, which allows you to learn, iterate, extract, and move forward. And so that's also why I think from a consumer lens, it's no coincidence that consumers are infinitely more trained to have that baseline expectation on the customer funnel side, because that's just the nature of AI and what we've all experienced.
Something you said that really sticks with me is actually iterate. And I think people miss that. It's like, yep, AI is incredible and it will move you forward, but you still need to iterate, go get the data, go build that learn flow. Do you have any advice to people who are like kind of tapping into all the tools out there, or like, you're using AI on a daily basis, like any workflows you have or principles that you have to make sure that actually we're getting the job done in the way that we need to?
That's a good question. I think, and this, I credit a lot of this to the internal practices of Shopify and the baseline expectation that Toby has set internally.
Yeah.
We use coding agents like I brush my teeth. We use AI reflexively, as everyone knows. It's part of the culture of Shopify now. It's default to AI, and whether you're a merchant, whether you're on the SaaS side, whether you're not even in commerce, I would argue that the difference. It was interesting. I was chatting with a friend who's a family physician, and we were chatting about coding agents, and it was a new concept to him. And my argument was the difference in technology, the difference in the leap forward from an agent to an LLM chat interface is greater than the difference between an LLM chat interface and a traditional search engine. In terms of the execution, it is infinitely more powerful. So going back to your question about iterating, there's obviously, agile principles in terms of leveraging, not boiling the ocean, not over indexing on all these different apps and bloating it, your state of affairs with your tech stack and just staying lean, clearing data, staying tight, and making strategic decisions based on that data. But I'd also argue that coding agents are honestly a really good accelerant and speed ramp to doing that aggregation for you so that that exercise isn't manual.
What did you learn about kind of AI as a baseline expectation? Like, where do you think the mistakes were? Shopify is, it's one of the very, very few public companies that I own shares in directly. Like, where I'm just like, I just believe deeply in the future. And it's like, I'm all bought in, but I'm also running a company with 20 employees and a couple hundred customers, and we're wrestling with it the same as all of our brands are. How do we go make sure that if we are a more AI native company or a more AI fluent company, or it's like at the core of everything we're doing, that we do it in the right way, we don't screw it up? Like, what are those behaviors? What advice do you have?
Yeah, no, I think, and what's nice is I would actually argue that the feather in Narita's cap is having 20 odd employees. You can iterate more quickly than a large organization, but you benefit from where I think Shopify really leaned in, which is this social proofing crowdsourcing. We have 7,000 8,000 employees at Shopify, and the ability for us to, within a team, within a department, company wide, share best practices, share different examples of how we're leveraging AI. I think that propelled everyone forward. And again, following Toby's announcement or email blast about this reflexive baseline expectation of AI, I think it all just got us on the same page where we wanted to embrace it. It was under our own terms as a company because it seeped into our values. It wasn't something that was enforced. It was, you have a privilege and an opportunity and a set of tools. We had a playground, we had the scaffolding, and we just had to get our hands dirty. And so, again, it has not to be dramatic, but it has dramatically changed the way that we all work. I teased coding agents, but just to give you an example, there's presentations that we can make without ever touching slides themselves. So it's to that point where we've refined prompting so much that the way that we interact with software has fundamentally changed. And I would argue that for a company that has 20 employees, that feedback loop is actually significantly shorter, which is fantastic because you all get to share in a matter of minutes, seconds, days, which is fantastic.
I like that. I also like the concept of it. It's a privilege or a playground. A buddy is at Anthropic, and I won't go any further outside of like how every single part of the system is about accelerating and learning. And just like the way that they build is so fundamentally different from any other company I've ever engaged with. And obviously you guys, I think more than anybody else, certainly in this ecosystem, are like far on that path. I want to go back to the consumer journey because you kind of talked about that earlier. Are there aspects of personalization that you think are overwrought, where it's like, cool, this is personalized and like people think that's the job to be done? Or when you think about personalization, what is it? Is it something around like using the data to really craft what product I'm seeing? Where is personalization actually useful?
It's a wonderful. I promised you I'd stop saying it's a wonderful or good question, but I can't help myself. These are fantastic questions. I would, personalization. Going back to the Venn diagram, concept that I was speaking to before, or kerfuffle. That was from a role perspective. I would argue the same holds true for this concept of personalization because, again, you've been in the industry forever, and having spent 10 plus years in it at this point, there used to be more defined lanes in terms of, I would argue, areas of specialty for a given piece of software, whether that's within Shopify or integrated with Shopify, et cetera, right? Like you had your email, you had your SMS, you had your upsell, cross sell, you had your post sale, you had your loyalty. And everyone is personalization now, right? You used to have personalization apps, and then they started to kind of spread and elongate the funnel themselves. But then it just got to the point where there was a lot of convergence because what is personalization? It's creating personal, I mean, without using the word within the definition, it's creating bespoke, unique journeys for a consumer that is going to result in success. Whether success is acquisition, whether it's conversion, retention, a view, a click through, what have you, a loyalty sign up. It doesn't always have to be directly monetary related, but it's, again, because personalization is a baseline expectation of digital consumer behavior. I'd actually extend that and just say omnichannel consumer behavior, channel agnostic. I'd say personalization to me is a piece of software that has a mission of making sure that they can be malleable enough to bend and flex to different consumers.
I like it. That was a great answer. All right. I want to talk a little bit about, we're going to stay on AI. I'm sorry. You said AI conversations are going to replace search as an entry point to shopping. I'm not asking you for a prediction of when, right? But like, obviously the tides are shifting. And you guys work with brands, as you've mentioned, 3 million, some big, some small. If I'm a brand owner and I feel behind right now, where do I start?
It can be very daunting. It's also a very
Mhm.
exciting opportunity because here you have this net new sales channel, a referral channel, whatever you want to call it. It could be one or end or, let's say. And that's a new line of revenue. And the question is it cannibalizing online or traditional, brick and mortar sales? Like, not really, to be honest. I think it's just it's not a zero sum game, right? It's extra gravy. And so the question is, how do you show up and be relevant in these new channels? I mean, the data speaks for itself in terms of the crossover from consumer behavior to defaulting to LLMs for discovery, let alone purchasing. Now, the question becomes, how do you differentiate yourself as a brand and show up where it matters? It's what I refer to, and I've had obviously numerous conversations with brands since NRF, because that's where we launched UCP, Universal Commerce Protocol, really setting the standard, co-authoring with Google, the scaffolding for brokering commerce in all the structured data to these LLMs so that brands aren't having to guess and be interpreted by LLMs that are crawling search engines, right? And so step one is, I mean, being on Shopify or leveraging UCP, like that is a feather in your cap, regardless of what you do from there. But then the question is what is it within the customer or the merchant's control, retailer's control to elevate their presence? It's what I refer to as the great data cleanup. So whether your SKU count is 5 or 5 million or 500,000, there's the nooks and crannies and really the makeup of your product, your content strategy, everything that is legible by a machine that is completely within your control. And the question is it structured? Is it consistent? Is it reflective of your brand story? Is everything filled out? Like, let's just start there. Do you have a complete set of information? Are you leveraging product attributes? Are you leveraging meta fields? Like, do you have proper imagery? Do you have titles? Is your pricing consistent across channels? These are all, it's like eating your vegetables. These are just things that you have to do as part of due diligence. But it's an interesting time where obviously larger brands are, they're very engaged in like comprehensive AI audits. But I'd say even for a brand just getting started, using something like the knowledge base app that Shopify has is a really great place to start. Low hanging fruit. It's a free app by Shopify, first party. And what it allows you to do is it gives you a qualitative funnel to tell these LLMs more about your business. So it's, again, another outlet that is in your control, but it also gives you insight into how brands are finding you based on how customers are finding you as a brand based on the queries that they have with LLMs. And so it will aggregate that and give you insights. And so what I would argue to sum up is, great data cleanup, get your data hygiene in order. That is extremely of the utmost importance. But the other side of it is on the qualitative side. Again, make sure your brand strategy is consistent, but also make sure that you are continuing to refine and, again, iterate what, I don't want to say your business model, but what your voice online is based on how customers are actually finding you. Because at the end of the day, there may be a discrepancy between how you intend for your customers to find you and in reality, how they actually end up finding you in this new paradigm.
Makes sense. Maybe asking more of a perception than that you would have any data. Have you seen the teams that are building kind of change fundamentally over time, right? It used to be it would take 20,000 employees because it would, and then it was 2,000, it was 200, and then it was 20. You could build a $100 million revenue business with 20 people. Have you seen that it's like a different type of founder recently who's building the fast growing companies, or a more analytical data driven, or agencies are coming into play more because it's like, I can't figure out this AI stuff. I'm, an amazing craftsperson who's going to build my brand and my product, but leave the technology to something else. Have there been any shifts in how people are building?
All of the above. I think
Okay.
it depends on AI. It depends on AI literacy and curiosity. Those are the two pieces. Because if you're
Okay.
if you're not curious, then you'll default to deferring to someone else. And that's not to say an agency is like a deferral in a negative way. There's a time and place for it. But I think there's room for both. You can have your cake and eat it too, where you lean on an agency for execution, retainer, just continued growth and augmentation of your sphere. But again, depending on the scale and magnitude of the business, whether you're a founder, mid-level manager, individual contributor, again, not to plug in Sidekick, but it is so powerful that it is a co-pilot. It is a sidekick in nature, in that it sits on top of your entire commerce footprint. It sits on top of the business health. And so again, going back to curiosity, your appetite as an individual to lean into that new way of working, very similar to us at Shopify. We leaned into it because we wanted to, because we embraced it, and that resulted in a new way of working. Those who lean into it see great return. Those who don't, I think it's kind of like the horse and buggy situation. Eventually they're going to get with the program. It may just be a different time horizon.
I hear you. Yeah, I want to tease together some things that I've heard throughout this whole conversation. And I want to figure out some of the habits of the best performing brands, right? So in no particular order of things I've heard, curiosity, which I deeply appreciate, right? Like how do we build better, right? To achieve our goals. Empathy of the customer, keeping the customer kind of top of mind. Data at the core, right? My language, not yours, but you talk about the great data cleanup. Like, are you actually doing are there other habits that you've seen from the best brands? And it's not just today, but even going back to your role as an MSM or like in the office when you're kind of handling VIP clients. Are there other like key things that you see habitually across the best brands on the platform?
It's, what I would say there is that one of the best habits are and again, there's many, but one that comes to mind, and this is me putting my enterprise hat on, is our enterprise brands who again are curious, but it goes beyond curiosity. It's that they're realistic and they're proactive around how their customer is evolving relative to their business model. So I'll give you two wonderful examples: Mattel
Mm,
and Barnes and Noble. Right.
mhm,
So Mattel, funny enough, toy company, and what did they do? They looked at the adult space because you have Hot Wheels and Barbie, and you have folks that grew up with those properties. They
mm,
have an affinity towards those brands and there's massive loyalty there. And so parents as purchaser, parents is also the consumer. And so you look at Mattel, who has an 80-year history, really interesting and fascinating business model where again, I can't remember, I don't remember off the top of my head how tenured Mattel Creations is, but I'm pretty sure that's like a 7, 8, 9 year business. And so for them to create that line of business from scratch, lean into that digital footprint, an entirely new business model in terms of the price point, the product line, but
mm,
leveraging the evergreen brands that they have and spinning that off into again a very incredible business for that cohort of customers. That is a habit that again is incredible and inspiring, but is not limited to them. Because look no further than Barnes Noble, 150-year-old company. They have an enormous product SKU count, right? Like you can imagine all the books. That's a very unique digital, I would say, opportunity to optimize for. And so customers are reading digitally more and more. Customers are purchasing books more online based on reviews more than going, like, again, I wouldn't say more than going to bookstores traditionally, but obviously digital shopping has become pervasive from 150 years ago, needless to say. And so I think that's obviously a newer launch that has come to Shopify, but their ability to modernize their stack, and really the reason I touch on Mattel and Barnes and Noble is because they habitually had very, they come from their legacy backgrounds with a certain set of tech. They've been able to integrate a modern platform in a way to maintain and preserve what makes their heritage special, but flex and modernize the experience to the evolving consumer.
thanks, man. I appreciate you pulling that together. Matt, I've exhausted questions. I can go for hours on this stuff and you know it, but I do want to be respectful of your time. So thank you. I've already got a couple pages of notes here. I want to create space if there's any takeaways that you want to share or any guidance you have for brands who are somewhere on their journey. Assume pretty much everybody who's listening is already a Shopify brand. So you don't, everybody's bought in. You don't need to tell anybody why they need to go to Shopify. But anything specifically that you want to call out or any takeaways left before we
Yeah, not to be cliche, but I would just say, following the theme of this conversation, I'm glad that we're able to just riff and have a casual conversation like this. Is stay curious. I mean, again, I'm at Shopify because I have the utmost passion for what we're doing and the trajectory, even beyond Shopify, of where commerce is going. Right, retail has shifted so much in the last 5 years. It's a very exciting time. The consumer shopping journey continues to evolve. And again, this isn't a plug for Shopify per se, but just following the hub and spoke model of Shopify, we see consumers on YouTube, we see them on TikTok and on social, of course. We see them in Roblox, right? And so there's so many different shapes of that consumer journey. And of course, now this new agentic wave with LLMs. What I would say is enjoy the ride and just stay curious about where the customer is. And I think a lot of brands will default to looking at, what is their top line growth and what are the metrics that have traditionally contributed to that. And that could be your AOVs and your conversion rates and your LTVs. And those are very important. I'm not suggesting to ignore those. But I'd argue is that you add another to the mix, which is what is the shape of the consumer? And of course you look at referral traffic, but I think qualitatively almost doing like CSAT scores with your customer to understand, how are they finding you? How are they hoping to find you? And then reconciling those two is a very powerful thing because that's ultimately going to make you connect more with your customer. And I also think that's just going to fulfill us as retailers, as technologists in just filling our cup of doing why we do. So that's my takeaway. But I would love to ask you, Aaron, because I've done all the talking.
Oh,
What
but
have what
that was such a good way to end it, man. That was so good. Okay, we'll cut this part, but what's up?
I just want to hear from you. What is your takeaway?
On everything, on what's happening in the
Yeah,
ecosystem?
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, man. It's an exciting time to build. I wish I was still running a brand. Before co-founding Arita, that was a non-zero chance it was gonna happen. Just the tooling that's out there. And the flip side is kind of what I was saying before is it can definitely be overwhelming. There's unlimited places to turn, right? If I think back to running Modify, my brand before co-founding Passport, the way I always describe that journey is we sold the company. It was for less than we raised, but it was an exit. But it was one of the companies that like I started in 2010 and we grew very quickly. And then I, as a CEO, screwed up. And I screwed up because we did well in many channels instead of great in one channel. And I could see the same thing happening now, right? Which is like, oh, right back then it was like Facebook is a thing. Cool. We can go access people. Oh, we did sports licensing. Oh, wholesale. Cool. There's this new fair marketplace, right? And so like we explored everything. And the reality is like what I needed to do was be hyper focused. And so I'm very empathetic to the brand owners today, especially those who are like beyond just figuring it out, but they're scaling. They've got a big team and they're stressed about how do I grow this profitably? And it's like sometimes you just need to keep the main thing. But there's so many distractions right now. There's so many things you could build or so many ways that you could go explore. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but that is definitely something that it may just be I'm old. Like I'm super curious, but, but
It's
I've gotten
very
burned.
articulated, and it resonates with me deeply because I think it actually ties back to the beginning of our conversation when you asked me, and I was reflecting on what value I extracted from Spin Master, and I spoke about the cross functional management. I
Mhm.
think it's multidimensional to your point, and that like that's kind of horizontally, and now vertically you have all these different channels that you have to upkeep, and it's like you're like a chef with 20 different pans. So it's yeah, I have the utmost empathy, but also respect for retailers these days because I
Yeah.
feel like it's another level from when I was in that seat. That's for sure.
The other thing you said earlier that's kind of definitely like is in my purview is the idea of, personalization was an app and now it's the surface areas have started to overlap a lot, right? So like everybody's kind of mixing and matching, but you're seeing it in the return space, certainly, right? Where there are like these super apps that are popping up and they're doing stuff, right? The post purchase space. And some of them have really bad products, but they're still doing it. And if you're a merchant and you don't know any better, and there's some influencer on LinkedIn or Twitter who's like, oh yeah, this is great. And you don't know if that person's an influencer and actually has no idea what normally he is talking about, you kind of are like, cool, let me go buy this bundled product. And so I see that happen. And I have empathy for merchants on that front. We're starting to see it in our space where people are just adding and saying, oh, yeah, we do what Arita does. And there's also so much noise in the ecosystem because it is so quick to spin stuff up. We've taken a different stance. And again, time will tell if we're right or not, which is like, we don't launch many products because we're like, we're going to solve a really, really, really hard problem that Claude can't solve. And if Claude can solve it, we probably shouldn't be doing it because we could just open source, like tell a brand how to do it for free. And so I do think there's this like tension as somebody who's raised venture money and we're building a fast growing business. Like we need to go build products that are like truly differentiated, not to like spike, make some cash and then flame out, but literally to go build a durable asset. And I think watching that happen in this ecosystem is compelling, frustrating, must be so confusing for brands. So I also like, maybe just to pull this back to like why I'm so fascinated in Shopify and why like I appreciate all of our conversations and every interaction I've had with Shopify is it's actually like at the core, you guys are, how do we go solve stuff for the merchant, which means solving stuff for the consumer. And like that is it. And it's not let us go build some BS products so that we can tick a box and say we did it so we can sucker somebody in. There's just always a quality bar. And I think we're in a phase right now in commerce where that's being missed, where people are just like, yeah, we do this. And it's not, oh, we do this really well. And so that just feels like a tension that I'm seeing. I don't know if you see the same thing
I
or,
couldn't agree more. I'd actually, again, I'd argue it transcends Shopify in that Shopify, Arita, really any other software vendor that will let in. I'd argue that AI is a catalyst that, Anthropic's, your OpenAI's, they're all catalysts to to expose what's otherwise commoditized, right? So it's, if anything, I'd say the silver lining, like to your strategy, is that it's validation that the investments that you're making and that we're making and that any great software company is making is the right path. Because rather than diluting what your investments are to where it's going to be eaten up by these specialists who can create something from scratch with a prompt, you're you're carving out a unique path that can coexist and that integrates and is differentiated enough to warrant having a healthy business model.
Thanks, man. I really love chatting with you. This is such a
Likewise,
delight.
it's been too long. So thank you for
Yeah.
having me. This is awesome.
All right, Matt, anywhere people should find you? LinkedIn? Do you want them to just go shopify.com? I'm
Yeah,
giving you room.
Shopify.com, LinkedIn. I'm on X as well. So you find me
Okay.
anywhere. I'm here.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Aaron. Talk soon.
I'm Aaron Schwartz, co-founder of Arita AI, where we help hundreds of brands like Spanx, Faraday, and Salt and Stone get the absolute most out of their customer lists. Learn more at arita.ai or check out my interviews with the founders of Klaviyo, Birdies, Caraway, and plenty more wherever you get your podcasts.